in it. But first, I just want to tell you a story about when I was a graduate student. I decided to specialize in economics after taking a course called The Economics of Politics. And it was about public choice. And I really enjoyed this course, even though the professor was making the Chicago school and the Virginia school the same and call it the American things. And so actually my work is about this kind of phenomenon, put people in some category without actually reading it or knowing it fully. So I'm very happy to be here and to hear about the Buchanan's and what the Virginia school is really about in a sense. So that's why. So my PhD is about history of the economics of discrimination, and it's the perspective it's mainly history of economics and methodology of economics. And I try to focus the history on three questions: epistemological question, actually, explanation and causality, measurement and evidence. And so I try to see in the history how was controversy about these three elements, how is it, and what are people talking about. So now this paper. So I just will be just tell you the motivation for this paper that come at the end of my PhD dissertation, and it's mainly about Kenneth Arrow, and so the question is why I'm talking about him. So first of all, he did some contribution to the field, that is obvious, but not that known. Then he discussed very much the role of economics in studying discrimination. So he had some methodological issue about it. And then he did some non-academic work about discrimination. He was he testified in trials along with Paul Samuelson concerning class action, concerning discrimination in promotion at Dupont de Nemours cases. He also testified along with Barbara Bregman along sex discrimination trial. He was also part of a lot of committee for affirmative action or committees against political discrimination, and he also sent a lot of letters with or without, but that with Amnesty International. So that is all part of. So this non-academic work I know about because I went to you to check the archive about it, and you have a lot of letters from Amnesty International saying thank you, Kenneth Arrow, to take part in it, and it's mainly about discrimination, political discrimination against other academics in other places of the world. So this is why I want to talk about Kenneth Arrow. So briefly, I will present the field before he enters, then expose his first work on discrimination was actually a Round Corporation report he did in the 70s, and then I present the literature that also talking about statistical discrimination after Kenneth Arrow, and finally I will present his position on the fact that he has what has economics to say about racial discrimination, and asking is it sufficient to have market-based explanation of discrimination, and that will be the last part. So first, I just want to give you like a very basic definition of discrimination, of economic discrimination. The first one in the 30s was by Onkins, and it was treating inequally equals. So this means, for example, on the labor market, equally capable person in terms of productivity variables will not be rewarded by equal pay or equal outcomes. So this is the basic economic definition. So in the late 90s, you do have economic thought on wages inequality, and it's mainly on racial issues and women's issues. And so you have a big controversy about equal pay for equal work. So this is in UK, essentially, but also in US. And in US, it's more related to the minimum wage legislation concerning women's. You have Chat-based Clark for talking about that. You also have those notion of low wage races, and so about the Irish and other people in America. So among all those issues that were actually, I used here in the book on vanity of the culture, all that. Yeah. You have theory where actually trying to explain why there is differences in wage, and also ask directly the question, should there be equal? This is the title of a report by Beatrice Webb about women's wages. Should they be equal? And so asking the question about the equal pay things. So you have this different tradition. One is based on non-competing groups, and saying basically that people are not competing for the same job. So that's why sometimes involve women competing only for certain kind of jobs. So they are coding into certain occupations, so that's why their wages are lower. You also have an explanation by legal discrimination, which earlier as Bentham talked about it, and John Stuart Mill. And after that, you have a tradition mainly linked to institutionalism, but I'm not sure that's about because it's not exactly, it's not the old institutionalist, it's the one after. And actually, Myrdal was not, at the beginning he was not an institutionalist, he began one, how do you say that? He called himself an institutionalist after doing an American Dilemma. And he actually wrote in an American Dilemma, he talked about the cumulative causation concerning racial discrimination, and he used this concept, he borrowed this concept from Jepson, and he used this concept in reference to his work on monetary equilibrium or something like that in his 30s. So, yeah, you have this literature. And actually, but the very beginning of the economics of discrimination, because those work are not are economic thought, and not trying to modelize discrimination. So the real beginning of the economics of discrimination is the economics of discrimination, which is the title of Becker's dissertation. He did under the supervision of Webb Lewis in Chicago. And so in this work, so the dissertation is called The Economics of Racial Discrimination, and the book is just more general, and he tried to do a general theory of discrimination, so that when the content of discrimination could be gender, race, but anything, well, not anything. It's more general. So in this model, you have discrimination is seen as taste for discrimination. So basically, if an individual has a taste for discrimination, he must act as if he were willing to pay something, either directly or in the form of a reduced income, to be associated with someone he doesn't like. So in fact, here you have discrimination as a social distance. You can pay for it. And in the model, actually, he put it in the trade model. So that's why Stiglitz called it the preference trade model. And he used a model with student society, and discrimination is mostly seen as a tariff or as a cost that produce the efficiency of the application. And so due to competitive forces, there is an elimination of discrimination. So actually the model says that discrimination will disappear. So that is what before our begin to work on discrimination. So what I still didn't know is why he did work on discrimination under a World Corporation report. Because I found a letter from the round at this time asking him to do a report on information in economics. and Harrow just came with a report of discrimination. So I didn't find the other letter in Harrow's archive, so I hope to find something in the Round Corporation archive about it. So the main objective of the report is to demonstrate the advantages and disadvantages of neoclassical analysis as a tool for studying racial discrimination in the economic sphere. So basically here, that's why I just wanted to say that I use the term neoclassical economics of discrimination because Becker and Harrow are calling themselves neoclassical, so I just wanted to make sure of that. So in this report, he actually did several things. He complements Becker's model. He did put some things on information and try to build a new theory of discrimination. But it's really, he had another objective that is countering radical or feminist or Marxist theory of discrimination also. So first he complements Becker's model, saying that even under imperfect competition, profit maximizer will find it profitable to take over film from utility maximizer. So in that, it just say that the models still apply under imperfect competition. Then he rejects on methodological ground what he called the group interest hypothesis, saying that he said it works, but it's not in the tradition of economics. So that's not an argument, but the argument follows after that. He just said that he reassesses commitment to individualism, methodological individualism, and say that he reformulates the question of exploitation in another term, saying what would prevent an individual employer from refusing to discriminate if he preferred nearby profit. So he just addressed this question, what Becker actually just did in the footnotes, like something not really matter. So the argument then is about the exploitation of blacks can work if the tendency of individual employers to buy the cheapest labor is somehow suppressed. So that is a very classical argument. Then what he had to that is change. So basically, here he put it that way, that change is costly. So he trying here to just present argument to say that competition will not eliminate discrimination very fast. And he tried to put what he called adjustment cost, making it disappear as well. Long run period of time. So here, basically, change is costly, essentially because you have an assumption that when you hire somebody, you make an investment in it. So if you have to make an investment, if there is a change in your level wage, you will not immediately change all your labor force to go to another labor force just because there is a slightly different level in wages. So you have an adjustment for that. And when you talk about change on a broader scale, like history, he say that the same argument. So if we start from a position where black workers enter an essentially all-white world, the social feeling of racialism with the employers and employees relate to difference in wages. And here he say that the forces of competition and the tendency to profit maximization will operate to mitigate these differences, but the basic fact of personal investment prevent this countering tendency from working in full force. So you have, again, this time for adjustment linked to the fact that you have to make investment. At the end of the report, it's just introducing information. Here you have the shift saying that all this is a problem of adverse selection. Essentially because the employer doesn't know the productivity, the qualification of the worker, so he has to, he's in the framework that is uncertain, so he has to rely on some, what we call subjective probabilities. And so he said that the simplest explanation of this probability, this judgment you are making on the probability to be qualified, are just based on prejudice. So here he just gives a very literal definition of prejudice, which is just judgment about abilities made in advance of the evidence and not altered by it. So he just, that's the end of the report, and that actually his starting point for making a new theory of discrimination. So this theory is, he gave a conference the same year as the report at Princeton University and published it in two different versions. One is a mathematical model and the other one is a more literary theory. And so here you have a new basis for discrimination. This new basis is discrimination can be solved not as reflecting not taste but perception of reality. The second is that it gives a new framework, a new neoclassical framework with the abandonment of some assumption like costless adjustment, perfect information, perfect capital market, and that implies a new definition of discrimination. Let's say discrimination is an evaluation on the market of personal characteristics of the worker which are not related to productivity. So this is the new definition, and this is the new theory. So statistical discrimination occurs when individuals use projection of group productivity based on statistical reasoning or belief to hire or value an individual on the market. So here again, he shifts from taste to belief. So where does the belief came from? He offered three explanations. The first one came from Léon Pestanger, but I think he's American, so I don't know how to say it. So his theory is about only the belief who are in accordance with reality will survive. So the belief who will survive are those who are true, in a sense. The second explanation for this belief is that there is real difference in productivity on the market between the groups. And the last one is that there is imperfect human capital market. That means you do invest in human capital and that you're not provided in terms of you don't have the same return to investment when you are part of different group. So here, there's three explanation it gave for the origin of belief. I think are very ambiguous, because if you have real difference in productivity on endowment, is it really discrimination? I mean, if you select people according to that. So you have here, and it's really what the other theory will be focused on is that if there's real difference, is the statistical discrimination not just an efficient process to select people on the market? If race or gender is like a proxy that is efficient to predict productivity, is that discrimination or is that just selection? So that's exactly the question we were raised after this contribution. And actually what is interesting is that Phelps' work is just after, it's in 1972, and he's called it a statistical prejudice, an exact statistical prejudice theory. And his theory is talking about this type of statistical discrimination I will just define. And he's the one who coined the term statistical discrimination, because Arrow is not using it at the beginning. So this part is about what happened after Arrow concerning this type of discrimination theory. So the contribution in that field are mainly done the way that they apply the economics of information to labor market analysis and using different sets of framework. So in the literature, you do have two types of discrimination actually in those theories, and some authors are just saying it's very clearly, and some are just implicit on that. So the first type of statistical discrimination is pure statistical discrimination, and that means you do have a difference between groups. So distinguish, I mean, it's exactly what I was saying just before, race and gender becoming like a real proxy, a real information that predicts your real productivity. So in that case, you have the sense of discrimination is mainly the old sense of discrimination or the mathematical sense of discrimination, meaning you select based on a criteria that is predicting productivity. So in that sense, that's a problem actually, but this is not discrimination. I mean, it's another kind of problem, and it's actually a correlation between two factors, but it's not what we call discrimination, meaning equal productive people will not be rewarded by equality. It's something else. And the other type of statistical discrimination is statistical discrimination by mistake. That means the two groups are not differing in productivity. You just make like false judgment or false prediction. So because we moved from because they moved from a kind of a partial equilibrium to a kind of general equilibrium way of thinking, they were interested in the stability of this discrimination. And so the pure statistical discrimination is actually stable, but it's kind of contradiction with the standard definition of discrimination. So it's interesting, but it's interesting. The second type of discrimination by mistake is unstable because you should have a learning effect on what are the real productivity of people, of individuals. So there is another type of individual discrimination that are not stable, but that actually saying a lot more than this type of discrimination is that you do have a difference between groups in terms of average productivity, but that doesn't say what is the distribution productivity inside a group. So for example, you could be an individual that is under the average productivity of the group, and so you will be overpaid because you will be judged on the average productivity of the group, or you could be like over the average productivity of your group, and you will get underpaid for your productivity. So this is based on the fact that you could have individual discrimination with no group discrimination. That means group differing in level of productivity, but individual are distributed along the same thing. So in any case, what Jean-Michel Plassard is saying about this is if you have a wage policy which is based on false judgment on productivity, you still, I mean, it's possible and stable under what you call the realistic hypothesis that all the current and potential employers have the same erroneous conception of the world. So you don't have learning effect if everybody is wrong. But if somebody, that will change. So here again, you have the same problem, not problem, but you have the same thing as in the taste-based model. So the variety of states or the variety of belief will make competition, make discrimination disappear. So you have the same way of thinking about in a equilibrium way. So this is one of the first question from this set of theories. The second question is about the distinction between market and pre-market discrimination. So the first set of remarks came from a different literature, but it asks the question: what if productivity variables are themselves the result of discrimination? You don't have any more definition of discrimination because you could not separate what is real intentional discrimination or like there is something we could call pre-discrimination, for example, in education, And is that an economic discrimination or is that something else? And the other problem that is very much important, I think, than the previous one is that what happens if we have self-fulfilling prophecies about that? So Lundberg and Starr are just saying that because you have rational adaptation to current discrimination, you will not invest in human capital. Because if you are to be judged on race or gender, why you will invest in human capital anyway? Because it's not rewarded. So you have this kind of circular things. And Stiglitz talked about auto-selection, saying you select yourself to not go somewhere else because you anticipate something about the current level of discrimination because you're part of one group or another group. So this is another problem. And I think the most important, I just take an example to illustrate this problem. In Salomon Polacek, I take his work especially because he's a Becker student, and he used to work with Becker, and he was at Columbia developing what was known at that time the Morningside AIDS model, that is basically human capital model, and at the labor market workshop with Jacob Minzer. And so he said that you have different phenomena that are directly related to discrimination, and that you have interrelation between discrimination and other phenomena, and it's very difficult to differentiate, to say where within the economy the discrimination is lying, or is it outside the economy or before market or something like this. So it basically say that this is very important for policy making. So, for example, if firms discriminate in hiring, promotion, or in pay practice, then you have a kind of equal opportunity laws, possibly in quotas. I will come back to this question after. But on the other end, if the wage gap, and he's talking about between men and women here, if the wage gap emerged because of differences in human capital brought on the market, that you have a completely different policy if you want to make the wage gap going in another way. And he especially developed the idea of the difference is based on the lifetime labor supply, that is different from women and from men. So I just and he say that the market-based discrimination is not that much important to explain inequality in general. It's other type of phenomenon and not discrimination per se. So what I wanted to say, just presenting those arguments that I didn't put that much into context, but that coming perhaps after, I hope, is to see that you have a shift inside the neoclassical tradition from a kind of intentional discrimination to an unintentional discrimination that is based on statistical correlation or error that you made. And that's something that Glenn Murray pointed that this is a change in the responsibility of discrimination. So is that the discriminator that is responsible that are responsible to discrimination, or that the people who are discriminated would just make a bad choice and human capital investment or another type of choice? So this is a very interesting question because it changed the normative charge of discrimination. I mean, who is responsible for it? And the other thing is you have a mix of different type of phenomenon, like discrimination per se, that is treating somebody unfairly or inequally, choice, a different type of choice that people make in society, and rational adaptation to current discrimination, what I try to say about self-fulfilling prophecy. And so the question after that is that extending the definition of economic discrimination, or is that a non-definition of discrimination? Do we still have to focus and try to isolate discrimination, or do we have to relate it to other type of phenomena? And so I'm not doing this in this paper, but in my PhD, the reason why I wanted to focus on neoclassical here was to see that comparing to the tradition in economics, and it could be institutionalist, feminist, but also, I mean, a lot of different type of tradition, they all try to link discrimination to the type of phenomenon. And in the classical tradition, they try to isolate discrimination from other type of discrimination of phenomenon. So this was linked to empirical measurements that they needed, and they wanted to have in further modeling a clear definition that you could isolate discrimination from other type of phenomena. So back to Arrow. What does it think about what all this development on statistical discrimination in the 70s mainly? Actually, in this tradition there was not so much theoretical development after Becker and Arrow than these two types of discrimination. There were a lot of models trying to mix it or to, but not other type of model. So in the late 90s, he was asked by Alan Kruger to write a paper to be a part of a symposium in the Journal of Economic Perspective. And so in this symposium, you have 3 papers on evidence of discrimination using experiments, wage decomposition methods to measure the wage gap, and also qualitative research and wanted to measure discrimination. You have a paper by Ekman criticizing the experimental method, and the paper by Ben Louis I already mentioned, and you have this paper by Arrow, which is called What Has Economics to Say About Racial Discrimination. So in this paper, he actually restates the statistical discrimination theory, exactly using what was said by all the people before about just in the 70s. And it's a little bit more clear. Here he said that discrimination is to use observable characteristic like race or gender as a surrogate for the unobservable characteristic, which in fact cause the productivity differences. And so he stated that this is a market-based explanation. It doesn't require taste for discrimination. So as in the Rand Corporation report, the target was what he called the group interest hypothesis. Here, in this paper, the target is Becker. And he wrote a lot about how you could see the taste-based hypothesis as an ad hoc hypothesis. He quotes Molière saying that this is tautological and etc. So he changed this orientation, and it's also perhaps that Becker at this time was not Becker at the other time. He got the Nobel Prize between the two things, and perhaps also at this time the feminists were more powerful. I don't know. It's something that I have to check. He also stated the same distinction between the two types of discrimination that are actually depend on the ability to observe and measure the productivity of the individual. And we talk about the self-fulfilling prophecy, saying if an employer is going to judge by race, then there is no regard for human capital investment, or there will not be acquired, then the statistical judgment will be confirmed. So you have this kind of phenomenon. And then it says something about stability, say that each employer has a very limited range of experience, and so the belief can remain relatively undisturbed. And he says something I think very interesting is the very fact of segregation will reinforce belief, and that a lot of people, other people talk about the link between discrimination and segregation. That could also be just occupational segregation, for example, and that's it. So Becker stopped here, Arrow stopped here about the market-based theory and say, and he actually, the paper just after goes on saying market-based explanation are not enough. So my question in the paper was, wide, and so I didn't observe, so I hope to have some comments. So he restates the statistical discrimination theory, and then he go on asking, can a phenomenon whose manifestations are everywhere in the social world really be understood, even in only one aspect, by the tools of a single discipline? And so then the paper is moving from the question of how to explain discrimination using economics to, is economics sufficient to explain discrimination? And so here he puts some statements about the insufficient theory about discrimination, but doesn't go back to his theory, saying, is my theory okay, or do I have to change it, or something else? And so he just said that because of the instability of discrimination in the models, they are not enough. So he said that market-based explanation will tend to predict that threshold discrimination will be eliminated, and since they are not, we must stick elsewhere for non-market factors influencing economic behavior. And so when you talk about evidence, you talk about the evidence that is in the symposium, saying that there is still a wage gap, there is still discrimination in promotion, there is still discrimination in another practice. Then he just say that enough has been said to suggest that market-based theory given an inadequate account to the effects of threshold discrimination. So that is exactly that I didn't understand, because this paper is not saying that at all. And he goes on saying that you have social interaction with economic implications that are not mediated through the market, but rather through the cumulative effect of individual choices. And then it just say that market has to be replaced by the notion of network, because market is just a special type of network, and that each transaction is a social event. And he put here a lot of work that are very interesting in economic sociology, contribution about the labor market. And so my question here is that he states but not demonstrates that the explanation, the basic explanation, it just said that here, that very earlier, that the basic explanation must lie outside the economic field. But it doesn't clearly define what the economic field is, and actually the way I understood it, the way you define it is that economics is the tools, and I think this term tools is very important here, the tools of classical theory. So, I mean, you have a very technical way of looking at what is economics, and so my next work will be about that question. Because what I want to ask, doing a history of the economics of discrimination, is also discussing history of economics, what is economics, and how economics changed as a discipline over some times. So here is just a few three thoughts I've got about it that is linked to this work that is again unfinished. Is that I was expecting that he puts something on the specificity of economics regarding discrimination, and especially this question about the efficiency side of discrimination. But it's a question which actually is just asked by one or two people, and I mean, Becker and Arrow always say that they will check this, and they're actually not, they are not checking this that much, that's my opinion, and I want to go further than this. And I wonder, if this, what I just presented to you is just Arrow making a point saying that there is a classical division of labor between social sciences, that sociology and psychology have to do this and economics have to do that? Or is that just a conception of economics that is particular and special about it? And so that has the question of the frontier of the discipline, that question that was really asked when Becker first worked on discrimination by all the people, but also he wrote a lot about this. So I want to compare the position of Becker and the position of Arrow on what is economics and what are the subjects of economics and what are the methods of economics, and that's it. And in a sense, here I presented that they're, in a sense, in the same side and not on the same side. So I have to check it more clearly. And the big question behind it is because I started this history by mainly the wage determination theory at the end of the 19th century. And I want to check, in this tradition, the relationship between wage and marginal productivity is this relationship historically considered that I'd like to check. So I'm finished. I just want to say that this is work in progress, and I want to put, this is just a skeleton, and I want to put flesh in it, like text, because it's in the 70s, and there's a lot of things happening. And also in context, in intellectual context, like Arrow's work in a more general term. I'd like to find the things about the Run Corporation project, and also this thing I really like to talk about is in the archive you have an exchange of letters between Arrow, Barreder, and Marcel on the question of quotas in an affirmative action, and they talk about the committee for affirmative action in the American Economic Association. And I didn't find any information about it, but I'd like to, because it's really interesting, but the discussion is really interesting and very polite, so I'd like to check this. So thank you very much.